It was a bright, sunny Tuesday morning in Willow Creek, a quiet little neighborhood where everyone knew everyone, or at least they thought they did. Birds chirped in the trees, kids rode their bikes down the street, and the smell of fresh-cut grass filled the air. It was the kind of place where nothing big ever happened, or so it seemed. Alex Harper, a new guy in town, was sitting on his porch, sipping a glass of orange juice. He was waiting for something special, a package. Not a big, fancy box with shiny wrapping, just a plain, small brown box he'd been thinking about for weeks. It was supposed to come today, and Alex kept checking his watch, his eyes darting to the road every few minutes. He didn't look nervous, but there was something about the way he sat, so still and focused, that made you wonder, what was in that box? Why was it so important? Here's the thing, nobody knew the truth about that package. Not the delivery guy who drove the big white van, not the neighbors watering their flowers or walking their dogs, and definitely not Karen, the lady who acted like she was the boss of Willow Creek. Karen was the president of the HOA, that's the group that makes rules for the neighborhood, like how tall your grass can be or what color your mailbox should be. Karen loved rules. She loved them so much she'd walk around with a clipboard, writing down anything she thought was wrong. A bike left in a driveway, she'd knock on your door. A loud radio, she'd leave a note. Karen thought she knew everything about everyone. But Alex, he was a puzzle to her. He'd moved into the little blue house on Maple Street just a month ago. He didn't talk much. He didn't throw loud parties or leave trash cans out too long. He just smiled, waved, and went about his day. To most people that was fine, but to Karen it was suspicious. "Why's he so quiet?" she'd say to her friends over coffee at her house. "Nobody's that boring. He's hiding something, I just know it." Her friends would nod, sipping their drinks, while Karen stared out her window, watching Alex's house like it was a locked treasure chest. That morning, as Alex waited for his package, Karen was already on the move. She wore her usual outfit, a bright pink shirt, white sneakers, and a big sun hat that made her look like she was going on a safari. Her clipboard was tucked under her arm and her eyes were sharp, scanning the street for anything out of place. She noticed Alex on his porch and frowned. "What's he doing just sitting there?" she muttered to herself. "Probably up to no good." Karen didn't know it yet, but she was about to make a big mistake. That package Alex was waiting for, it wasn't just any delivery. And messing with it was going to turn her world upside down. Let's back up a bit and talk about Alex. He was a regular-looking guy, not too tall, not too short, with brown hair and a friendly smile. He wore jeans and a plain gray t-shirt most days, nothing flashy. When he moved to Willow Creek, he didn't make a big deal about it. He carried boxes into his house, set up a few chairs on his porch, and that was that. The neighbors liked him okay. Mrs. Thompson, who lived next door, said he was polite. Mr. Garcia across the street said he helped carry groceries once, but nobody knew much about him. Where did he come from? What did he do for a living? Why did he pick Willow Creek? That's what bugged Karen the most. She liked knowing everything. She had a file in her office with notes about every house in the neighborhood. Who lived there, what they did, even what kind of pets they had. But Alex's file, it was almost empty. Alex Harper, it said, with a question mark next to his name. That question mark drove Karen crazy. She tried asking him questions once when he was watering his lawn. "So Alex, where'd you move from?" she'd said, smiling her biggest smile. Alex just shrugged and said, "Oh, around." Around? What kind of answer was that? Karen wasn't used to people dodging her questions. So she started watching him closer. Every morning, she'd peek out her window to see what he was doing. If he left his house, she'd note what time. If he got mail, she'd try to see what it was. Once she even walked by his trash cans to check if he threw out anything weird. Just some pizza boxes and soda cans. To Karen, Alex was like a game she had to win. She was sure he was hiding something, and she was going to figure it out. Back to that Tuesday morning. The sun was climbing higher and the street was getting busier. Kids zoomed by on scooters, laughing and shouting. A dog barked somewhere down the block. Alex was still on his porch, his orange juice almost gone. He checked his phone, then looked up as a white delivery van turned onto Maple Street. His eyes lit up just a little. The van slowed down and the driver hopped out, holding a small brown box. It wasn't big, about the size of a shoebox with plain tape and a white label. Nothing special to look at, but to Alex, it was everything. The driver walked toward Alex's house, but before he could get to the porch, Karen appeared. She moved fast for someone in a sun hat, her sneakers squeaking on the sidewalk. "Hold on," she called, waving her clipboard like a flag. The driver stopped, looking confused. "Is that for number 12 Maple Street?" Karen asked, pointing at Alex's house. The driver nodded. "Yup, for Alex Harper." Karen's eyes narrowed. "I'll take it," she said, holding out her hands. The driver hesitated. It's supposed to go to the address," he started, but Karen cut him off. "I'm the HOA president," she said, standing taller. "We have rules about packages. They can attract thieves. I'll make sure it's safe." The driver didn't want to argue. Karen had that kind of voice, loud and bossy, like a teacher who doesn't let you talk. He handed her the box and got back in his van, driving off to his next stop. Alex watched the whole thing from his porch. He didn't yell or run over. He didn't even stand up. He just sat there, his face calm, like he'd expected this. Karen held the box tight, turning it over to read the label. She said, loud enough for Alex to hear. "Doesn't say what's inside. Suspicious." She looked at him, waiting for a reaction. Alex just nodded, like he was saying, "Okay, sure." Then he picked up his empty glass and went inside, closing the door softly behind him. Karen stood there, box in hand, feeling like she'd won. She stopped whatever Alex was planning, or so she thought. She marched back to her house, her hat bouncing with every step. She didn't know what was in the box, but she was sure it was trouble. Maybe it was something illegal or something dangerous. She'd keep it in her garage, she decided, until she could figure it out. Nobody was going to pull one over on Karen. But inside his house, Alex wasn't worried. He walked to his kitchen, set his glass in the sink, and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number, waited a second, and then spoke in a low voice. "They took it," he said. There was a pause, like someone on the other end was talking. Alex nodded. "Yeah, I know, I'll handle it." He hung up, looked out his window at Karen's house, and smiled, just a tiny bit. What was in that box that made Alex so sure of himself? Why didn't he fight to get it back? And what did he mean by "I'll handle it"? Karen thought she was in charge, but she had no idea what she'd just stepped into. That plain little box wasn't just a package. It was the start of something big, something that would shake up Willow Creek and teach Karen a lesson she'd never forget. The sun kept shining, the birds kept singing, and Willow Creek looked as peaceful as ever. But under the surface, things were about to get wild. Alex wasn't just a quiet guy with a friendly wave. He was someone with a secret tied to that box. And Karen, with her clipboard and her rules, was about to learn that some packages are better left alone. Karen was the kind of person everyone in Willow Creek knew about. She wasn't just any neighbor. She was the boss of the HOA, the group that made rules for the whole neighborhood. If your grass grew a tiny bit too tall, Karen would show up with a piece of paper saying you owed money. If your car was parked just a little bit wrong, she'd call a tow truck before you could blink. She walked around with a clipboard, writing down every little thing she didn't like. To Karen, rules were everything, and she made sure everyone followed them. But there was one thing Karen loved even more than rules: snooping. She was always watching, always curious, always sticking her nose where it didn't belong. Her favorite target: packages. Every time a delivery van rolled into the neighborhood, Karen was there, eyeing the boxes like they might be hiding something dangerous. "Packages attract thieves," she'd say, holding her clipboard tight, acting like she was a detective in a movie. She'd check the labels, ask the drivers questions, and sometimes even take the boxes to inspect them. Most people just sighed and let her do it. Nobody wanted to argue with Karen. So when Alex's package showed up that sunny Tuesday morning, Karen was ready. She'd been watching his house all week, sure he was up to something. Alex was new, quiet, and didn't talk much, which made Karen suspicious. "Nobody's that boring," she'd mutter to herself, peeking out her window. When she saw the white delivery van pull up to Alex's house, her eyes lit up. This was her chance to find out what he was hiding. The van stopped and the driver hopped out holding a small brown box. It wasn't big or fancy, just plain with Alex's name written on the side. Karen marched across the street, her pink shirt bright in the sunlight, her clipboard bouncing under her arm. "Wait right there," she called, her voice loud enough to make a dog down the street bark. The driver looked up, surprised. "Is that for number 12 Maple Street?" Karen asked, pointing at Alex's house. The driver nodded. "Yeah, for Alex Harper." Karen stepped closer, squinting at the box like it might bite her. "This looks suspicious," she said, tapping the box with her pen. No return address, no company name, could be anything in there. The driver scratched his head, confused. "It's just a package, ma'am," he said, but Karen wasn't listening. "I'm holding this until I know it's safe," she told him, crossing her arms. "We can't have dangerous things in our neighborhood." The driver didn't know what to do. Karen was loud and she had that look like she'd keep talking until he gave in. "Okay, fine," he mumbled, handing her the box, "but it's supposed to go to Mr. Harper." Karen just waved him off. "I'll handle it," she said, clutching the box like it was a prize. The driver shrugged, climbed back into his van and drove away, probably glad to be done with her. Across the street, Alex was watching from his window. He stood still, his eyes locked on Karen as she held his package. His jaw was tight, like he was biting back something he wanted to say. You'd think he'd be mad, someone just took his stuff after all. Most people would run outside, yell, or demand their box back. But Alex didn't do any of that. He didn't even open his door. He just watched, his face calm, like he wasn't surprised at all. Then he did something strange. He pulled out his phone, pressed a button, and held it to his ear. "They took it," he said, his voice so low you could barely hear it. There was a pause, like someone on the other end was talking. Alex nodded just once. "Got it, I'll handle it," he said, then hung up. He put the phone in his pocket, took one last look at Karen marching back to her house with his box, and turned away from the window. What was that all about? Why was Alex so calm? If someone took my package, I'd be upset. I'd want to know what they were doing with it. But Alex acted like it was no big deal, like he knew something Karen didn't. What was in that box that made him so sure of himself? And why didn't he fight to get it back right then and there? Karen, meanwhile, was feeling pretty proud. She walked into her house, the box tucked under her arm, and set it on her kitchen table. She turned it over, looking for clues. No fancy stickers, no big words, just Alex's name and address. She said, tapping her chin. "What's so special about this?" She thought about opening it, but even Karen knew that was against the rule. Instead, she decided to keep it in her garage. "I'll figure out what he's up to," she said to herself, smiling. She locked the box in a cabinet, thinking she'd won this round. But Karen didn't know the whole story. That box wasn't just some random delivery. It was important, way more important than she could guess. And Alex, he wasn't just a quiet guy who moved to Willow Creek for no reason. He had a plan, and Karen had just walked right into it. The neighborhood looked peaceful that morning, with kids playing and flowers blooming. But under all that calm, something was brewing. Karen thought she was in charge, thought she could control everything with her clipboard and her rules. She thought Alex was just a nobody she could boss around, but she was wrong. That phone call Alex made, it wasn't to a friend or a family member. It was to someone else, someone who knew exactly what was in that box. What was Alex planning? Who was he talking to? And why did he let Karen take the package without a fight? Those questions hung in the air like a storm cloud waiting to burst. Karen was sure she'd caught Alex in some kind of trick. But the truth, she was the one who just made a big mistake. The days went by slowly in Willow Creek, and Karen still had Alex's package. She kept it locked tight in a cabinet in her garage, like it was some kind of treasure she'd won. Every morning, she'd check on it, turning the box over in her hands, looking for anything strange. There was nothing to see, just plain brown paper and Alex's name on the label, but that didn't stop her. Karen was sure she'd caught him doing something sneaky, and she wasn't going to let it go. She loved telling everyone about it. At her coffee meetings with the neighbors, she'd lean back in her chair, sip her iced tea, and brag. "You can't be too careful," she'd say, her voice loud and proud. "That Alex guy, he's up to no good. I took his package before he could cause trouble." The neighbors would nod, not because they agreed, but because nobody wanted to argue with Karen. She had a way of talking that made you feel like you had to listen. "It's my job to keep this neighborhood safe," she'd add, holding her clipboard like a badge, "and I'm good at it." But while Karen was busy talking, Alex wasn't just sitting around. He was quiet, sure, but he was watching. Every day he'd take a walk around the block, his hands in his pockets, looking like any regular guy. He'd pass by Karen's house, not too fast, not too slow, just casual. He noticed things, like how Karen always checked her mailbox at exactly 3 o'clock, or how she'd leave her garage door open a tiny bit when she went to water her flowers. He didn't write anything down or act suspicious. He just kept walking, his eyes sharp, taking it all in. The neighbors didn't think much of it. To them, Alex was just the new guy who didn't make a fuss. But Karen, she saw him walk by and got even more curious. "Why's he always out there?" she'd mutter, peeking through her blinds. "He's planning something, I know it." She started keeping a list on her clipboard, times Alex left his house, where he went, what he was wearing. To her, it was proof he was trouble. But Alex wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just waiting. Then one night, something weird happened. It was late, way past bedtime for most of Willow Creek. The street was dark, and the only sounds were crickets chirping and a dog barking far away. A big black SUV rolled into the neighborhood, slow and quiet, with its lights turned off. It stopped right in front of Alex's house. Two men got out, both wearing dark jackets and hats pulled low. They looked around, making sure nobody was watching, and knocked on Alex's door. Karen, of course, was awake. She never slept much, always too busy spying. She saw the SUV through her window and gasped. "I knew it," she whispered, grabbing her phone. She hid behind her blinds, her heart racing, and started recording. This is it, she thought. Proof Alex is a bad guy. The men didn't look friendly in that car. It was like something from a spy movie. Karen was sure she'd caught him red-handed. Alex opened his door just a crack at first. He didn't look scared or surprised. He talked to the men for a minute, his voice too low for Karen to hear. One of the men handed him something small. Karen couldn't tell what it was, maybe a phone or a little box. Alex nodded, said something else, and then the men left. They got back in their SUV and drove off, still without turning on their lights. The whole thing took maybe 5 minutes. Karen stopped recording, her hands shaking with excitement. "Got you," she said to herself, smiling big. She played the video back, zooming in on the men's faces, but it was too dark to see much. Still, she was thrilled. "Told you he was trouble," she whispered, already planning to show the video to her coffee group. She thought Alex was meeting with bad guys, maybe planning a crime. Oh, she couldn't wait to tell everyone how right she'd been. But here's the thing, Karen didn't know the whole story. Those men weren't bad guys, at least not the way she thought. And that little thing they gave Alex, it wasn't a weapon or a secret plan. It was something else, something tied to that package she was hiding in her garage. Karen thought she was so smart, but she was missing the biggest piece of the puzzle. Across the street, Alex sat in his living room, looking at the small device the men had given him. He turned it over in his hands, his face calm. He didn't pace or look nervous. He just set the device on his table, picked up his phone, and made another call. "It's done," he said quietly. There was a pause, then he nodded. "Yeah, I'm ready." He hung up and leaned back in his chair, staring out his window toward Karen's house. What was going on? Why was Alex so cool and collected? Most people would be freaking out if someone took their package and strange men showed up at their door. But Alex acted like everything was going exactly the way he wanted. That package in Karen's garage, it wasn't just some random box. It was starting to cause a stir, and not just in Willow Creek. People far away, people Karen would never meet, were talking about it. They were asking questions, making plans, and Alex was right in the middle of it all. Karen didn't notice, but things were getting tense. The next day, she went about her usual routine, checking mailboxes, writing notes, sipping her tea. She told her friends about the SUV, showing them her blurry video. "See, I told you he's shady," she said, pointing at her phone. Her friends looked at each other, not sure what to think. "Maybe it's nothing," one of them said. Karen scoffed. "Nothing, you'll see. I'm keeping that box until I know what's what." Meanwhile, Alex kept walking by her house. He didn't knock or ask for his package back. He just watched, like he was waiting for the perfect moment. Once, Karen caught him looking at her garage, and she slammed her window shut, her heart pounding. "What's he want?" she muttered. She checked the cabinet again, making sure the box was still there. It was safe and sound, but for the first time, Karen felt a tiny bit nervous. What if she'd made a mistake? She pushed the thought away. "No way," she told herself. "I'm in charge here." But deep down, something was nagging at her. Alex wasn't acting like someone who'd been caught. He was too calm, too sure. And those men in the SUV, they didn't act like criminals sneaking around. They acted like they had a job to do. The truth was, Karen's little victory was starting to unravel. That box she was so proud of taking, it was more important than she could imagine. And Alex, he wasn't just a quiet neighbor, he was someone with a secret, a big one. Karen thought she was playing a game and winning, but the game was bigger than she knew, and she was about to find out she wasn't the one making the rules. It was Friday morning in Willow Creek, and the sun was shining bright, just like any other day. Kids were getting ready for school, and neighbors were sipping coffee on their porches. But at Karen's house, things were about to get wild. Her doorbell rang loud and sharp, cutting through the quiet. Karen was in her kitchen, sipping her usual iced tea, still feeling proud about keeping Alex's package locked away. She thought she was the smartest person in the neighborhood, always one step ahead. But when she heard that doorbell, something felt off. She walked to the door, her pink slippers slapping the floor, and opened it with her usual big smile. That smile disappeared fast. Standing there was Alex, the quiet guy she'd been watching for weeks. He looked calm, like he was just stopping by to say hi. But behind him were two men in dark suits, their faces serious. One of them held up a shiny badge that glinted in the sunlight. "FBI," he said, his voice deep and no nonsense. Karen's mouth fell open, and her tea glass almost slipped from her hand. For the first time ever, Karen didn't know what to say. She just stared, her eyes wide, like she'd seen a ghost. The man with the badge didn't wait for her to speak. "Ma'am," he said, "you're holding a package that belongs to Mr. Harper." He nodded toward Alex, who stood there, hands in his pockets, not saying a word. "It's got evidence we've been tracking. You need to open your garage right now." Karen's face went pale, like all the color drained out of it. She tried to talk, but her words came out all jumbled. I was keeping the neighborhood safe," she said, her voice shaky. She looked at Alex, then at the men, then back at Alex again. Her brain was spinning. FBI evidence, what was going on? She thought Alex was just a weird guy hiding something sneaky. But this was way bigger than she'd ever imagined. The second agent stepped forward, his eyes narrow. "Ma'am, let's go," he said, pointing toward the garage. Karen didn't move at first. She just stood there, clutching her tea glass like it could save her. But the agents weren't asking, they were telling. Alex still didn't say anything. He just followed them as Karen finally turned and led the way to her garage, her slippers dragging on the ground. The whole neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. A few neighbors peeked out their windows, wondering why two fancy-looking men were at Karen's house. Nobody knew what was happening, but it felt big. Karen's garage door was closed, and her hands shook as she fumbled with the key. It's in here," she mumbled, trying to sound like she was still in charge, but her voice was small now, not loud and bossy like usual. She opened the door, and the agents walked right in, not waiting for her to invite them. Karen pointed to a metal cabinet in the corner. "It's there," she said, her cheeks red. She'd locked Alex's package in that cabinet, thinking she was so clever. Now she wasn't so sure. The first agent opened the cabinet and pulled out the plain brown box. It looked just like it did when Karen took it, small, boring, with Alex's name on the side. But the way the agents handled it, you'd think it was made of gold. They set the box on a table in the garage and opened it carefully. Karen leaned forward, trying to see, her heart pounding. Inside was a small, black case no bigger than a lunchbox. It had a tiny light on it, blinking red like something from a spy movie. Karen blinked, confused. "What's that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The second agent didn't look at her, he just pointed to the